All right, I want to talk about what is the best treatment for obsessive compulsive disorder, and in our opinion, the best treatment for all mental health constraints, if you want to call it that, or disorders or emotional disturbances, all the wide ranges of the anxiety-based disorders. So you have GAD, panic disorder, PTSD, body dysmorphic disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, and just general emotional disturbances. Now, it doesn't really matter if you have a mental health disorder or not, because the principles of RBT work for everything. Unconditional acceptance cannot not get underneath anything. So, and that's why we practice these tools so much. It's basically, it has its flaws, but it can help with basically everything. It doesn't mean everything can get recovered from, or you're going to be able to completely get better from every single thing, because it's never been applied to, say, like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder or personality-based disorders. But there's a very good chance that unconditional acceptance, self-life, other acceptance, the principles from Stoicism and Greco-Roman philosophy, and even Eastern philosophy, Buddhists and stuff like that, that's more than likely the number one best option for obsessive compulsive disorder. Now, we primarily stick with obsessive compulsive disorder because everyone has had obsessive compulsive disorder. We still have it because it's more than likely genetic, just not active or in a recovery state right now, all of us on the YouTube channel, etc. But it is very, very important to state that this video will more than likely give one of the best explanations for what works for obsessive compulsive disorder, that I've seen. Before I go any further, please subscribe, hit that like button down below. Look for the WhatsApp link, direct message Phil. We can get you in right away. We have constant slots always filling up, but we try, because we work with a wide variety of time zones, to get people in as quickly as we can. And the webinars are 8:30 p.m. UK time on Tuesday. And then on top of that, looking for that big OCD conference that we will be working on, hopefully putting on here in the next 6 months. No guarantees, but hopefully, whether it's the end of this year or the beginning of the new year, etc. So, first of all, what is obsessive compulsive disorder? Okay, more than likely it's genetic. Now, a lot of people will say to me, well, no one in my family has it. The chances of that is probably very low. They more than likely have the obsessive compulsive gene, but I have rarely met someone where the person has obsessive compulsive disorder and their mom and their dads are completely rational humans. I haven't met a lot of people like that. Now, with genetics, the way it works, we'll go a little bit nerdier on this. Genetics can skip generations. So let's say your mom and your dad, it was on your father's side, how my father had obsessive compulsive disorder. So let's say it was on my dad's side. My dad had obsessive compulsive disorder. His mother had it really bad. I have multiple family members, first cousins and second cousins, that have it. So let's say my father didn't have it, his father didn't have it, and then his father, so my great-great-grandfather, my great-great-great-grandfather, and then 4 generations back the other way, so back in time, all had severe OCD, and for whatever reason, the gene turned off for 3 generations. That's how genetics works. But the chances of it not being genetic and it strictly being environmental is more than likely not factual. And the reason why is, what drives obsessive compulsive disorder? Irrational beliefs, strong, rigid demands and beliefs. And last time I checked, I don't know anyone who doesn't have strong, black and white, rigid beliefs about something: money, politics, religion, sex, relationships, schoolwork, perfectionism, sports. I have rarely met a very, very balanced person that doesn't have any sort of rigid demands. So if it was strictly environmental, that was turned on by what people call the trauma response, people go through crazy things all the time. Like, the way I say it is, if it was just how most people think, then every person on this planet would have chronic OCD. The other thing it's important to cover about OCD, this is going to be a very educational video, as well as what works for obsessive compulsive disorder in the reality, and what doesn't work as well, because I haven't done a video like this in a while. I've been talking a lot about how things feel in the mind, which is great. Those videos are amazing and they instill hope. Is that you hear a lot of stuff like 1 to 2% of the population has obsessive compulsive disorder. Absolutely not true whatsoever. So 1 to 2% of the people might have the gene, very similar to the BRA gene, okay, the breast cancer gene in females. I think 30% of females have the BRA gene, maybe more. 30% of females do not get breast cancer. Okay, so I don't know what the percentage is, but I know it's not 30%. And it's very similar. So statistically, if you have 100,000 people and 2% of all of them have OCD, the gene, okay, so 2% of them have the OCD. Of that 2,000, maybe 5 or 10 have severe chronic OCD. Maybe 5 or 10. So 5 to 10 people out of 100,000, maybe a little bit more than that, have severe chronic OCD. And I mean really severe, because there are different levels of OCD and severity in the mind. But the type of stuff that we work with, trust me, if it was more than that, let's even go to 20 per 100,000. If it was that much, even 50 out of 100,000, which would be that would be pushing it so high, in my opinion. The business would be, we wouldn't be able to keep up. It would be constant, and it is constant. It's constant, but it would be even more constant. So it's not what people think. Many of the people that you hear about, the Kim Kardashians, I did watch a lot of the David Beckham things. I wouldn't be surprised if Beckham had some mild OCD, but severe chronic OCD, I doubt it, because his game would have been affected so much. I've even heard stuff like Daniel Radcliffe, Harry Potter, had OCD, doubt it. He would have probably had multiple meltdowns on set, because then what happens is people with severe OCD, they go, what's wrong with me? How are these people living and doing all of this stuff? But if you look at people who have severe OCD, like Howie Mandel is a great example. Luke Combs, I think, has it as well. But Howie Mandel is the most famous person that we know with obsessive compulsive disorder. It's affected his life greatly. If I remember, he was living in a separate home on this property. And I've seen videos of him on the Britain's Got Talent having a bodyguard walk in front of him, not having people touch him, etc., which obviously is a massive compulsion, which surprised the individuals he worked with. Well, hopefully they were telling him that, but that's a different story. So that's really the main thing to know about obsessive compulsive disorder, that it's not nearly as common as people make it out to be in the chronic format. Mild format, absolutely. Other types of neuroses, because remember, we have obsessive compulsive traits, where people like to call it obsessive compulsive personality disorder and stuff like that. These are all terms that don't really matter, because if you have OCPD or OCD, chronic or mild, the principles for acceptance still work the same. Okay, so that was a really good background, historical background about what's kind of going on today. So what do we know works the best for OCD? Okay, unconditional self-life other acceptance, breaking down worst case scenarios with unconditional self-life other acceptance, the principles from REBT, which tends to be much more emotive than CBT. So CBT, regular cognitive behavioral therapy, which was, I've heard a lot of people say, well, CBT is the gold standard, etc. Well, CBT came from REBT. So it's important to state that without REBT, there would be no CBT. So the other problem with CBT in today's day and age is CBT has a very watered down approach. There's many people I talk to that go to CBT, but then when they leave CBT and they talk to me, they talk to Rob, by very well-intentioned meaning individuals, they say stuff along the lines of, we did a lot of talk therapy, a lot of talking about my past, etc., etc. That's not CBT. CBT is cognitive behavioral therapy, okay? So lots of cognition, talking about belief systems, and B, with behaviors. It's fucking freezing, by the way. It's so cold. It's literally dropped like another 40 degrees. If I can see my breath coming up here. Then you're not getting proper CBT. CBT, no matter if it's CBT labeled REBT, if it's not based around belief systems, if you're spending loads amount of time speaking about your past, if you have a 45-minute session with someone and you spend 10 to 20 minutes of that speaking about your past, you're not doing cognitive behavioral therapy. And that's the biggest mistake when it comes to CBT that we see, because CBT cannot just be talking about the past. It has to be talking about your belief systems in the present. And that is, again, why so many people don't make any progress. Now, ERP, okay, exposure response prevention, is also touted as the gold standard in mental health, which it's not. It's not. Gold standard is a very silly term that people use. And they use this term in almost a fashion to where they put yourself above them. They say, well, ERP is the gold standard. Well, it's not, and it never will be the gold standard, because we know it's not the gold standard, and I know this is really hard for people to hear. Most people, if not all people we've worked with, have come from massive trials of ERP where they never talked about acceptance one time. So you cannot have ERP without unconditional self-life other acceptance. Just like you can't just have belief work without the behavioral component. As Ellis noticed in the 1950s, thinking, feeling, and behaving all affect each other. When you behave, when you avoid, when you procrastinate, you instill belief systems that make it more difficult to recover from OCD. So that's the other thing. So it's so important to break down that ERP is not the gold standard. It's just not. And until we accept that as a society, whether you're a therapist, whether you're a coach, whether you're someone else, a social worker, we're not going to change that much. We've already changed so much because of Rob. Rob Bray has changed OCD forever. He's single-handedly changed OCD more than any single person in mental health to ever live, because he's probably the first person to actually recover from OCD. I don't think there might have been off chances in the past throughout history, obviously abnormalities and outliers, but truly pioneering recovery, Rob is in a world of his own. He really is. I think of Rob as in the top 10 most influential people in psychology and mental health to ever live, up there with Freud and Jung. Probably more than likely in the future, 100, 200 years from now, he'll be more, in my opinion, Rob will be more famous than any of them because of what he did up there with Ellis. And Ellis would be there as well, in my opinion. But this is a real tough love video because it is so important to hear this. And what else works for obsessive compulsive disorder besides the RABT principles, CBT used properly with worst case scenarios, time and patience, okay? Which is the most overlooked aspect of the recovery journey. For some reason that is unknown to me, there are numerous posts on social media talking about how easy it is to recover, and that, okay, I'm gonna just be pretty frank on this one. If you think for a second with POCD, harm OCD, cheating, it's all the fears, I'm just using the big moral ones, that you're gonna be able to leave that there and wake up one day and accept your worst case scenario, it's never going to happen. I mean, crap, my body dysmorphia would not budge at all, strictly by just changing some behaviors and working on my beliefs more than most people. I had to really get under my fears of being fat, underneath my fears of rejection, underneath my fears of not being with more than one woman, my wife. It was tied into many different things. So now I want to talk for the remainder of this video about what doesn't work, okay, as a primary approach. Thoughts are thoughts, okay? Now, some people say to me, well, the person I'm working with doesn't use that term, so I'm not sure what you're talking about. Well, if they're saying leave thoughts there, the context of the thought doesn't matter, which is completely incorrect and taken out of tone. Let thoughts be there like a cloud. If they're saying that, they are telling you that thoughts are thoughts, that OCD takes orders from thoughts, and you can leave it there. And that does OCD recovery a massive injustice and disservice, because the OCD sufferer knows you can't fool us. You know, it's very similar to saying, well, you know, you didn't get properly, I don't want to use this, you weren't properly trained on this stuff. It's like, yeah, but I have it. So I know more than anyone because I've had it, I've lived it, and have gotten better and come out the other side of it. So it's, where's he at? Oh, there he is. But you don't want to hear that stuff because we have to be so correct about the way we say things. And this is why this video is a little bit more straightforward than I've done in a while, because these types of videos are really good for people to hear. Because what OCD sufferers will watch this type of stuff and they'll think, oh, Jesus, thank God someone's not talking to me like a baby, and the reassurance tone, and everything's going to be okay. And thank God they're just telling me what I already knew. But I had so many people giving me misinformation. It's not their fault. They're trying their best. But the problem is the people who try their best, a lot of them are unwilling to learn from the individuals that have it. It's very similar to going to a business school and talking to 5 MBAs, Masters in Business teachers at Harvard and Yale, who've never owned a business in their life. And then you being like, hey, I owned 16 different businesses. Many of them went bankrupt. I kept trying. I've had thousands of employees in my life. Some things have worked, some things haven't. And now I'm worth $900 million, etc. And then they're like, yeah, none of what you say works because you're not a master, you're not a teacher. It's like, this is very silly stuff. This is very new age stuff. Throughout history, your accolades from what you've achieved in your life have mattered more than anything in the field of value. So producing value. And this is what our value comes from, having OCD and living with it. So the thoughts are thoughts approach doesn't isn't going to give you the long-term relief you're looking for, okay? The other thing that doesn't work is having people tell you that you can reassure and vent sometimes. I hear this one a lot. Well, you could do reassurance and venting sometimes. That's like saying you can inject heroin Mondays and Thursdays twice a month, but you could still get sober from heroin. It's silly. It's not going to work. Until you hold yourself violently accountable, nothing's going to change. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. A little bit more straightforward than I have done in a while, but I think these videos have some good context. And every once in a while, it's good to put the reality out there about how OCD actually operates. And, it's hard to say, what's going to be the best thing, because people get so turned up on the evidence stuff, right? Like, this is what the evidence says. The evidence says this. You got to drop that stuff. The evidence in life is suggestive, and you can't put mental health research, you can't quantify mental health research into statements. So you just want to be wary when people are saying to you, well, this is what the research says and this is what the data says, because none of that actually matters. When people are saying that, usually coming from a conditional manner, and they're putting themselves on a high horse, which I know because I was in the literature doctoral world for I'm in that world, so I know how people operate, and I work around other providers, and they use these terminologies a lot, and it's an easy thing to do, but it's none of that matters. I mean, the amount of people that have to introduce themselves with doctor and stuff like that, so it's usually coming from a strong conditional manner. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Look out for the WhatsApp link down below. If you message Phil, direct message, it gets you right in. And then we can book you in as soon as you guys want to come in, and then we just go from there. And then the webinars are 8:30 p.m. on Tuesdays as always, and we hope to see you guys soon. Have a good one, everyone.